Hello and welcome to this special, a movable feast, if you will, as we follow some restless writers on the road. From Marco Polo's reports from the mysterious East, Mark Twain's adventures right here in Australia, through to Che Guevara's formative wanderings across South America, travel literature has a long, proud history. Books like Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love, writers like Bill Bryson, they regularly top the bestseller lists, yet there are those who consider the genre a shot duck. Even Paul Theroux, the father of the modern travel novel, has written that the genre has become little better than a licence to bore, the lowest form of literary self-indulgence. Can it be true? Is The Open Road a closed book? Surely not. Tonight we've brought some of the best in the field to talk about it. Tony Wheeler is the co-founder of one of the most successful guidebook empires in the world, Lonely Planet. Also, the author of Badlands, an account of his adventures through the axis of evil. Claire Scobie is a travel writer, journalist and author of Last Seen in Lhasa, the true story of a modern friendship in Tibet. William Dalrymple has written 9 books exploring the Muslim world, Buddhism, Jainism, the Mughal Empire, Pakistan, and of course his ongoing obsession with India. His latest book is 9 Lives, In Search of the Sacred in Modern India. And Cate Kennedy is an award-winning novelist, poet and short story writer who blurred the line between travel book and memoir with Sing and Don't Cry, a Mexican journal. Please welcome them all. Thank you. Now, it does seem that, in recent years anyway, you walk into the bookshop, you move over to the travel writing section, and there they are, just scores, hundreds of wide-eyed Westerners sort of authored books about going off, fleeing to the Mediterranean, where they progressively either build a house, learn to cook, save their souls, or certainly, tap into the secrets of the Tuscan ancients. What is going on? So you've been in the business for the longest. Where has it come from and where is it now, the travel book?
It's always going off in different directions, and I think it's sort of interesting to see how these trends do develop. We're having the live somewhere ongoing trend at the moment. You know, you build a house in Bali, which was a book back in the 30s, or you find a lover in Bali these days. You check the food in Provence or Tuscany or whatever. We've also had that whole series of, I think Michael Palin called it the Across the Andes by Frog school of travel journalism, where you hitchhike around Ireland with a fridge under your arm, or you buy an elephant.
We have that here somewhere.
Across Ireland by Fridge. There is such a book.
Yeah.
Yes, and basically, going around Cuba on a collapsible bike, going down the canoe Amazon. I mean, these are outlandish.
With his kayak.
Yes.
Yeah.
But isn't this when travel writing also becomes travel writing as gimmick as well? Do you think that when you...
You mean you can't cross the Andes on a frog?
Well, I don't know, maybe you can. But I think... I think you've got people like Dervla Murphy, who wrote Full Tilt about her journey with a bicycle, where her bicycle and her are one, and the way she travelled and how she travelled is integral to the story. But then sometimes I think you get these sort of gimmicky travel books where the mode of transport actually takes away from the story, and it's a way to get published.
Would you agree that's where we are at the moment? That's, the outlandish adventure?
Well, one of the problems, I think, with travel books is that, unlike the novel, where there's, famously, is 24 basic plots to the novel, with travel books, there's really only 3 plots. There's the frog of the fridge, which is one. There's the kind of go and live somewhere. And then there's, like, sort of following a theme, like Badlands and Tony's book. There's only so many things you can do with a travel book, and therefore you do get some repetition. What's happening at the moment, I think, is that there was a big boom in the late 80s, early 90s, and for 10 years there was this great wash of travel writing, ranging from adventure stuff to quite high literary stuff. Patrick Leigh Fermor, Time of Gifts, for my money, the best book of that period, along with Chatwin's and Patagonia. Then, like all literary trends, it passes. The current one, I think, is very much the go and live somewhere, kind of refashion your life. It's kind of variant on
basically, don't change. I mean, take yourself to someone else's place and write sort of, aren't they funny people with their funny
They're funny
ways?
foreigner. Always a good fallback in this game. Yeah.
It doesn't seem to have any place in modern writing, does it?
No, I think there's a huge place for travel writing. The reality is that I think that no longer is travel writing about finding new territory. In the 19th century, if you were a travel writer, you were explaining to an audience who'd never probably left Europe what it was like to see the interior of Australia or the dark interior of Africa. Or
don't we love Congo?
Yeah,
Congo's the place.
And Afghanistan.
Books on Congo. The two places, Congo and Afghanistan, that really encourage great writing.
Yeah.
But now, of course, you don't have that anymore because it's all been discovered, it's all been photographed. You can look it up on Google Maps before you even leave your living room. So travel writing's had to learn new tricks, and some of the tricks it's learned is either sort of, be funny, be Bill Bryson or Michael Palin. Or you can go, refashion your life. It's kind of self-help book in disguise as a travel book. Elizabeth Gilbert's failed marriage, goes and finds love in Bali. Or you can try a literary exercise. You can really try to write like Chatwin or Eric Newby or one of these great writers.
Or you can do what you did, actually. You did which is another very popular thing, where you have the journey within. You move on your feet, but actually the drama is going on partly inside your head.
Yes, I think that's been, that's another theme of maybe there are 4 basic plots then, because,
See if we can get to 24 by the end of the
that would be great. Then we've rediscovered,
Yeah.
reinvented travel writing. Yes, I think that's very popular, but I think it also goes with the territory, because when you travel somewhere, you perhaps look at how your world and being in another place can make you re-examine who you are. And certainly for me, being in Tibet with the nun Annie, and being with someone who had such a different life, so radically alternative to my own, coming from a very different culture, made me question my values and beliefs. And I think people like Peter Mathiasson, he does that very well in The Snow Leopard, because ostensibly the book's about going in search of a snow leopard, but actually it's also about how that becomes a Buddhist parable for the bigger picture and the meaning of life. And I think that gives a depth to travel writing. But I also think this whole idea of what you were saying, William, about there isn't the place for a travel writer as an explorer, because now we live in a world that's already discovered.
Yes.
And I think this is where travel writing is really changing. If we've already discovered everything and we can look on Google Maps before we go, we can have our iPhone when we're travelling, so we don't even have to refer to our Lonely Planet guidebook because we've already got it on our own.
They're online.
Then where do we go with it?
Kate?
That's a really good point. I think just thinking about that kind of book, it's more like an account, and I think you're right. The only territory that's left to explore is probably our own interior territory when we're there in that place, and we want to.
Or that of others.
Or that of others.
Yes.
That you're watching how those lives and perhaps your life are interacting, and the things you don't understand are kind of your areas of exploration, maybe. And so it's those areas.
And also, I was interested in the way, in your book, Sing and Don't Cry, you actually used your experience going to Mexico for 2 years, but you used the experience of being in this alien culture to cast shadows on your own. And so one of the things you talk about, the Mexicans having this reputation for being lazy and everything is mañana, let's postpone it. You say, but these are the very same people making these judgments who seem to spend such long stretches of time on hold in one way or another, who sit for minutes on end waiting for a recorded voice to tell them what button to press next on the phone message menu, who wait for 2 weeks for a plumber to come to their house, who sit stalled endlessly in jammed traffic waiting for the lights to change. Yeah. But that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, we are looking at them and saying, oh, look, you just sit around, don't do enough,
I tell you, I didn't see one Mexican ever sitting around. I guess that was the thing that you're confronting, isn't it? That you go with your own baggage, don't you? And you have to declare your baggage, because when you get somewhere that's so different from your expectations, it does make you question what those expectations are. And I would say probably there's a whole generation of people wanting to travel for that reason. And, I know for myself, Lonely Planet has been that fantastic sort of breaking open for that generation of people to say, I'm going to go somewhere, because it's almost like it's a purpose. I sometimes think that people travel now because we're affluent and we can, and it's, you know, the world's become so global. It's almost like it gives us a purpose in the same way that a kind of a quest would have given someone a purpose. You know?
I think, in a sense, the globalisation can be deceptive.
Yeah.
It's true that when you go to Mexico or to Sydney or to Scotland or to Mongolia, people will be wearing Nikes. There will be McDonald's in the streets of Ulaanbaatar as well as in Mexico City. But just beneath the surface of that globalisation, strip it away, everything is different. And the things people believe are incredibly different.
Yeah, despite getting 60 million tourists a year, the French are still French.
The job of the travel writer, I think, increasingly is to peel back that deceptive surface and see it's in a sense the same job as the novelist, but you're using non-fiction rather than fiction.
And it's part of what makes India so interesting right now, that it hasn't just made a clean step into the modern world, it's got one foot back there and one foot in the future. It's a real mix, and for a writer, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's true. And also the same with China. I've just recently read Peter Hessler's book, Country Driving.
Yeah, fantastic book.
Fantastic.
Explain what it's about.
It's Peter Hessler's an American writer. He speaks fluent Mandarin. He's correspondent for the New York Times, and it's set in 3 parts. The first part is sort of traditional travel. He's going in search of the remnants of the Great Wall. The middle part is about actually living in a ramshackle house in a village just outside of Beijing, where he really starts to get to know the locals and sees the rapid change that's going on. And the last part is really about travel as embracing the future, and it's taking us into the economic heartland of China in Zhejiang province. So it's where all our buttons and socks come from, all of these things that we buy from China. Hessler takes us into the factories. So it's travel as really unravelling a place and exploring the people there. And so you get an insight into China like I haven't read anywhere. And even though someone like Thubron with, you know, Behind the Wall was so brilliant, that was of its time. And to me, this is where travel writing is always reinventing itself, because it reflects the epoch of the age, and also it reflects the author's sensibilities.
In fact, you also say you love that book.
Yeah, and it's full of wonderful the questions that pop up on the Chinese driving license test. You know, when you come to a flood on the road, should you just drive through, or should you get a pedestrian to wade through for you to see if it's shallow enough?
This is a Chinese good, but it is highlighting, isn't it, that the travel writing is probably one of the most huge. The hugest of the genres, because there's a bit of science, a bit of anthropology, a lot of history,
whatever you want to throw into it.
Whatever, and you can call it travel writing.
This book I've just written, 9 Lives, is doing a similar thing in India to Peter Hessler. Everyone thinks of India as this land of eternal spirituality, of sadhus lost in a cloud of smoke. And I was trying to see how that is faring up in the new India. And the reality is, of course, that, you know, you come in sadhus, you talk to them, naked, holy men, completely without a stitch of clothing, rubbed ash on their bodies, carrying a tripod, going up the Himalayas. They've got an MBA. There was a tantric. The tantric I met was famous for collecting skulls. He had the biggest collection of skulls in Bengal. And I'd read about this guy in an academic paper, and eventually we tracked him down, and he was sitting outside a temple, evening, got a horrible sort of headless wickerwork image of Kali behind him, goat tethered, ready for sacrifice, mist rising. And I mean, you know, central casting,
and then
Orientalist.
his iPhone ran, right?
Worse. He started talking about his collection of skulls and said, yes, it was true. He'd had this wonderful collection of skulls, and yes, he used the spirits to go and do his black magic. And then he sort of shut up, and I said, oh, come on, you can tell me. He said, well, it's not you I'm worried about. He said, it's my sons. They're ophthalmologists in New Jersey. They said, Dad, you must stop going on about this stuff.
The embarrassment. Kate, I mean, this was the first novel that you... What put you into the travel genre? Why did you want to write it?
You know, it's funny, I sort of had this experience, it was 2.5 years long, where I was working with Australian Volunteers International, so I went across not knowing what to expect, and had one of those immersion experiences where not just learning a language, but learning another whole way of life. I was working in a microcredit cooperative with campesinos and peasant farmers, so I saw, you know, it was I think it was 3 or 4 years after the NAFTA agreement had been signed, so we were right there at the kind of
the pointy end
of economic reform, and all those things were sort of such a full-on sensory experience and a gigantic education that I sort of, when I got back, I just thought I've got to either write about this or go a bit nuts, you know, to sort of make an account of it for myself.
Is there room for the good old-fashioned, solid, adventuring, put the proper shoes on and go travel
Absolutely,
book?
you know, and there are lots of places that are hardly written about it at all. About a year before the earthquake, I was in Haiti. And, you know, could you find a book to read about Haiti? There is one, very, very good one. But there isn't much. You know, if someone had been there 6 months earlier and written a travel book about Haiti, they'd have sold a lot of copies recently.
Well, I would say that two of the best books written about Haiti, one is by Byrne. It's a novel, Any Other Life. One is...
Comedians.
Comedians by Greene. And that's... Are they travel novels?
And you can swim in the swimming pool that he starts that novel with.
But seriously, are they travel books, therefore? If they're novels that are set and beautifully evoke a place, do they come into travel?
I think a novel is a novel and a travel book has to be non-fiction, ultimately. That's the basic definition. I think
Now let's talk about that.
disagreement here.
Well, if I may, just to launch this section, quote Mr. Theroux, not only did he say it's the lowest form of literary self-indulgence, dishonest complaining, creative mendacity. Polite way of saying big, fat porky.
That's just Theroux writing about himself.
He makes up all those conversations, I'm
How
convinced.
much are we meant to believe?
Theroux is a tragic story in himself because he longs to be a novelist and he wrote these series of early novels that never sold more than 250 copies, he said in some interview. And then he wrote The Great Royal Bazaar and it sold 1.5 million copies. And that's been his fate ever since. He hates travel writing. He doesn't like it. But his travel books sell in the millions. His novels still sell 250 copies. And so he has to produce these travel books. He hates them. And this sort of self-loathing finds its way into the travel
I don't
book.
think it was himself he meant.
I think it's himself he's writing.
Creative mendacity. Fibs.
You know, there's something to be said for this thing, that the way what we look at when we look at our lives is when we reorder it and put it into some sort of sequence it's story-like. Yes, maybe it's an inevitable thing that we have to stretch things and conflate things and compress other things to make them fit somehow, the way that we want to imagine something happened. And maybe those conversations that we, you know, as you said, imagine ourselves having on the road, when we retell them later, they get a bit of a burnish to them, you know.
I'm sure there are some travel books where it's the person who's doing the travelling is travelling with an imaginary companion. They need a character they can kick the conversation around with and ask questions and be asked questions.
Yes.
And actually, they didn't travel with anybody at all. They were by themselves. There's one or two books where I'm convinced that the...
Does it matter? Does truth actually matter if the story
Well,
is
in a way,
strong?
it is the truth. It's the questions they would have asked, or maybe it's a question they did ask somebody, but it makes it more interesting if they ask it from their
I think it varies what you're doing. I think if it's Bill Bryson, you read him primarily to have a giggle. You know, no one minds whether that story about him wrapping his mother's car around the lamppost at the beginning of his first book is actually true. You read him for entertainment. If you're reading Peter Hessler and he's writing about modern China, you're wanting to be informed. Yeah. And it matters very much if he tells a story and it's just simply not true.
And what about if you're reading Bruce Chatwin or Richard Kapuscinski, both of whom have had the beam of truth lit upon them and failed?
But Bruce Chatwin actually referred to Songlines as a novel, didn't he?
It was put up for a travel book award and he withdrew it on the grounds that it was fiction.
Yes, he said it was fiction, but it's held as a great example of travel writing, isn't it? And just what you were saying, Tony, I don't know if you've read Colin Thurbron's Shadow of the Silk Road, but how he gets around that whole issue of travelling alone but wanting to have conversations is he imagines conversations with some of the ancient travellers that would have travelled along the Silk Road, and he has them in sort of interspersed within his travels. I think that's quite a good way of doing it. Now, he's someone who says he never invents anything, but I think there is a blurring of fact and fiction in some travel writing.
And as long as it's true to the principle or the experience.
And you obviously have to in some books. I mean, certainly in Badlands, there were places I couldn't say who I was talking with. You know, I changed them from old to young, from male to female, and amalgamated them together or broke them apart.
I thought this was a very, actually, noble service you did. What Tony did was travel through all the the pariah lands, starting with the George Bush axis of evil. But really, you went to every hellhole. You know,
No, they were fine. They were all... I had a good time in all of them.
on behalf of us all.
I even got drunk in Iran, which I thought was an achievement.
Not to mention brave. Does this prove that, in fact, there is such a thing as an armchair traveller? Because reading your book, I'm like, nah, don't want to go there, don't want to go there. It's a good thing.
I must admit, I love reading the books about... I mean, Congo has turned out great books, novels and...
Remino Hanlon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Congo Journey is fantastic.
Well, Heart of Darkness, you know, go right back to the beginning.
Yeah.
But isn't that, and that's part of it, isn't it? It's what people love. It's an escape, and it's also the fact that someone else can get their butt eaten by fire ants or whatever, or gouged by leeches, as I was in last scene in Lhasa. It's something that other people do, and you just get to read about it while you're sitting on your
cozy
deck
by the fire.
Yes, or having a cold beer or
Glass of whiskey.
So the point of the modern travel book is not to make you want to get up and go there. Is that right?
Oh, gee, that's a really good question. Sometimes I think perhaps that is a really good reason. That it makes people happy to have, the same as crime fiction, I guess, makes us happy to sit in an armchair and read about some horrible forensic investigation. We don't have to do that ourselves. We're happy to go into that dark mind, or we're happy to go into that dark place, but we do it with comfort, like we want the finite hardship when we go on a short trip somewhere and rough it, you know. Yeah. So maybe it's kind of good that we haven't got hordes of people trying to have their Tuscan, you know...
we do. They're all there. There's traffic jams in the little tiny villages.
Maybe there's plenty of people who are really happy just to read great writing about something and kind of re-experience it that way.
But I do think there's a very serious point left for travel. There is... Take someone like Iran or Afghanistan today. 9/11 showed how much these countries are misunderstood, particularly in America, where the anger of the Islamic world, no one had any idea about it. And the kind of manuals which are produced by anti-terrorism manuals, or kind of cheap tabloid journalism getting smaller and smaller as newspapers contract, telebites getting shorter and shorter as advertising expands. The travel book potentially is somewhere where you can have the space to really explore complexity, to really see the subjective, the individual in a landscape. And that seems to me a very, very rare and very precious thing, that we need to understand the world. Places like Afghanistan can impact now on Australia, on Britain, on America. The world is interconnected. And unless there's a real attempt to understand these places, there will be no way of understanding what's going on. It seems to me more than ever that the travel book is necessary.
I don't know if any of you have read Rolf Potts, who's an American travel writer. He's also got a big web blog. And what he's done is he's turned some of his blogs into a book, which is, I think it's called Marco Polo Didn't Go There, Travels and Revelations of One Decade of a Postmodern Travel Writer. And I think that's also interesting about the impact of the blog and the fact that we've got all this writing streaming out there. And where's that going to take travel writing? Is that going to change it? Because blogs are obviously immediate and instant, and a lot of travel writing is quite reflective and can be quite nostalgic in its tone. And I think the younger generation are also reflecting this, the changing technology.
I was talking to a boy of 21 the other day who's just been on a kind of backpacking adventure, and he said it was quite uncanny at backpackers' hostels to go down to the breakfast room. There would be silence. Everyone was at their laptop uploading their blog and uploading their photos from the day before, and nobody was talking to other travellers. They were just talking to their imaginary friends.
Which is awful.
But unlike newspapers, which are declining, book sales, I mean, as Elizabeth Gilbert shows, 7 million copies, can't be wrong.
People have said that the printed word is not dying. It's just not always appearing on paper. It's, printed on your iPad or your iPhone or something. And I think that's the case. We're going to keep on reading, but we don't necessarily read it as a book.
But, I mean, William's point that the fact you can see a place from Google Earth, but that's not very interesting.
Still want to go there.
Yeah, that's right. Who cares? The fact you can see it and get a little bit of a snippet about it makes you want to go there.
And the fact that you can read some blog from some guy sitting in his backpacker's hostel doesn't replace the pleasure of reading Bruce Chatwin's prose. Or amazing passage by... True or false. Or amazing passage of Time of Gifts. For my money, the most beautifully written travel book.
Where are you pining to go? Where would you just think would make a great subject for a travel book next?
Well, I've been talking about nothing but Congo tonight, so I suppose Congo would have to be it.
I think I'd love to go back to Tibet again.
Oh, that's just boring.
I know. Sorry.
You've done that.
You've done that.
How can you ever do somewhere?
I know, exactly. That's what I mean.
How can you ever do somewhere? Okay, if not Tibet, then India. It has to be India for me at the moment. That's, yes, big pulls.
I have to say to India too. I've been there 25 years, and I feel I haven't even got halfway through sort of layer one. It still bemuses me every day. It's still new ideas. I've got files of things to write about. It is the most complicated, complex, interesting country in the world to me.
I'm sorry to be boring, but I'm the same.
You're off to Mexico again?
I'd be back to Latin America, but I would have to do a sort of an island hop on the way, I think, because at the moment islands really interest me. So to say maybe a stopover, maybe in Madagascar or somewhere that just seems so fascinating and such an intense and diverse culture.
But on your way back to Mexico.
That's exactly. Oh, my
you
final
are
destination.
so predictable. I imagined you.
Let me concur with Williams. It's like you've barely scratched the surface. The more you look, the more you're going to see, and so it's almost like you want to continue the travelling that you've started. And that journey is such a long journey, and it's so complicated.
Well, I hope our program tonight has taken you away a little bit too. A huge thank you to my fabulous guests, Cate Kennedy, William Dalrymple, Claire Scobie and Tony Wheeler.
Thank you. Thank you.